In archaeology movies, Indiana Jones, The Mummy, Act, there's usually some booby trap or another protecting the site. What are real life instances of still working booby traps that have been set off at historical sites that may have killed or seriously injured archaeologists or their workers? There was an Egyptian tomb where a corridor went downhill by about 60 feet, and then uphill again. The engineers put dead animals and fresh plants etc in there before they sealed it up. And so the decline depression filled with CO2. It stayed like that for centuries. In modern times, when they unearthed the tomb, they found human skeletons centuries younger than the tomb, where people had died trying to get in. A deadly U-bend of suffocation, the most ingenious of traps. Valley of the Kings has a stairwell in one of the tombs where they purposely made the stairwell steep and purposely made steps at odd heights to throw someone's balance off, allowing them to tumble down the stairwell, and at the bottom is a deep put, so they break a limb and are stuck with no way out. That is just freaking evil. The amount of times I stumbled because I thought there was one more step at the end of stair and there wasn't. Not a booby trap, but in Tutankhamun's tomb, when it was first actually opened and Howard Carter put his head inside, the entire place had vases with perfectly dried and preserved flowers and reeds that, as soon as the relatively hot and moist air outside blew in, completely disintegrated. Part of what makes that incredible is how tightly sealed the tomb must have been to preserve it, but even the gust of air destroyed them. Sort of similar but not really. A lot of cursed objects that have been uncovered throughout history were really just carrying deadly mold or bacteria that killed the people who took possession of the objects. Off the top of my head, I know some tombs in South America have cinnabar sprinkled in them. No clue if anyone has died from it though. There may be a few weird examples of this, but the real dangers of working at a site are heat exhaustion and alcoholism. Mostly alcoholism. I saw a YouTube video many years ago that I haven't been able to find since, and the details are murky, but I remember the gist of it was that there was a tunnel system under a German city that the Nazis used to stash some of their gold. Allegedly, it was mentioned that these tunnels were likely booby trapped and the German government didn't want archaeologists messing with a site that was likely wired with bombs in an actual city. I've tried to find it again, but all that comes up is the Nazi gold train craze that wound up yielding nothing. Does a pit with a bunch of spiky rocks at the bottom of it count as a booby trap? Most deaths to that kind of thing are encountered by grave robbers and looters, not archaeologists. People interested in studying artifacts and restoring them tend to be more careful. Honestly, any booby trap that was still functioning after thousands of years would be of far greater archaeological value than whatever artifact Indiana was attempting to steal from the tomb. And yes, booby traps in tombs are totally a thing, although they generally don't resemble anything you'd see in an Indiana Jones movie. In my will, I fully intend to request my coffin lid be spring-loaded and filled with confetti cannons, so that 1,000 years from now I'll make an archaeologist's life a bit more exciting. I was never able to confirm this, but a cultural anthropology professor I was taught by in college used to be a field specialist on sites in Central America. He was a larger-than-life kind of dude who lived life to the fullest. You'll see why. He told us a story how when walking into what could best be described as a catacomb he got sprayed with a fine dust after he stepped on a pressure plate. Luckily his student and other workers got him before he suffocated. Turns out it was a type of embalming powder that can coat your lungs if you breathe it in. A year or so later at a different site, he and all of his team caught a form of malaria that was persistent and would lay dormant after he would get treatment. The malaria would end up coming back and killing him a year after I finished college. He made archaeology and anthropology friggin' fun. Kinda the opposite of what you're asking, but a major problem in nuclear disposal is how to convince people 10,000 years from now that this super fancy, highly fortified structure isn't the tomb of some great emperor or a temple to the god of the underworld. It's sealing away incredibly dangerous and extremely potent dark magic that will kill any who enter and contaminate the air, water, and land for millennia if it escapes. And have those warnings be not only understood but also taken seriously, and not brushed off as superstition or a bluff. Sounds like the plot of Prometheus. Credit for the question to you, Nice Cleavage 88. They asked it over on our Ask Historians, but it was removed as against sub rules, but I really wanted to see if there was a legit answer to this. Kudos on having an actual interesting question that I haven't seen on AskReddit in the past year. Not being sarcastic. Genuinely don't recall having seen a similar question in the past year, and I spent most of lockdown on Reddit. Unfortunately, I don't have a proper answer. Maybe I missed it, but the tomb of China's first emperor fits this category, the one with the terracotta warriors. They never actually got to the dude because of the Lake of Mercury. That wasn't intended as a trap. Mercury was thought to have all sorts of mystical powers, including granting immortality. The tomb was a scale model, and he intended to float around on the river of Mercury in the afterlife. Howard Carter, discoverer of Tutankhamun's tomb, was accompanied by Lord Carnarvon, who was dead a few weeks after the discovery. He allegedly was hit by a waft of fated air when he broke the seal and opened the door to the tombs. We also have possibly George Gould, who dies a short while after entering the tomb. Later we discovered Aspergillus fumigatus, a pathogenic fungi, had colonized the tomb. Fungal spores and yeasts can survive for centuries in a dormant state. We have cultured yeasts, same group as fungi, from bottles or Roman wine recovered from the Mediterranean in 2,000-year-old ampoules, and yeast from bakeries in ancient Egypt. Ancient Egyptians may not have no germ theory, but observationally they may have observed the impact of this fungi on people and deliberately seeded the tomb. This would not be as flashy as a bull rolling on a slope, but if the curse of the pharaohs was a biological weapon, word would soon get around that if you opened the tomb you'd die. Quite a discouragement. I've heard a theory that King Tut's tomb and the curse associated with it, sudden mysterious deaths of initial archaeologists soon after inspecting the tomb, may have been some form of toxic microdust that was laid across and throughout the entire tomb, and when the seal was broken and airflow kicked up the dust, it was inhaled and wreaked havoc on people who came into contact with it. Again, I have zero evidence to back this up. It is something I heard theorized. But also don't underestimate the Egyptians for being able to create such a substance. A real danger for archaeologists are highly toxic mold spores, and that was one theory for Tutankhamun's tomb, but the curse is just a myth. Toxic spores, not to mention the whole range of toxic stuff used by various cultures for embalming, is a good reason to never enter a tomb without rubber gloves and a high quality breathing filter. Okay, all answers aside, I just wanna mention that it's kinda funny that this post is NSW just cause the word booby was mentioned in the post. I just assumed it was because booby traps would be literally NSW for archaeologists. Archaeologist here. A friend of mine was working on a site in England where they had been bombing during the Blitz in World War II, and the bomb squad had given the all clear to excavate. The archaeologists later found unexploded shells that they hadn't found in the survey and had been digging with a pickaxe right next to it. Not exactly a booby trap, but definitely a holy crap moment. Is there actually any booby trap out there where the ceiling slowly descends, or where the walls move in to crush you? Where does this originate from? I asked someone this question years ago, when I was a kid terrified by the concept, and long before TV tropes existed, and it was suggested that the novel King Solomon's Mines by H. Rider Haggard might have originated that idea. 2. My time to shine. I run a daily trivia game where I angrily text my friends random questions every day. We've been running for like a year and a half. We did this one below on booby traps. The 10th of December 2020 daily log. You have a store of riches, or perhaps a secret most dreadful. It must be protected at all costs. How? Booby traps. The dangerous, hidden, secretive, silly named devices have deterred many a doe-eyed fool who valued riches more than his own skin. Which of the following is not an actual booby trap? A. Mechanical crossbows and rivers of liquid mercury protected the Terracotta Army, a massive series of sculptures depicting the armies of Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor of China. Spicy. B. Ivan Vasilievich. The first Tsar of Russia was a tyrant nicknamed Ivan the Terrible, a ruthless leader. It was wise to fear him in both life and death. In his mausoleum, his death mask was painted with a highly poisonous red cinnabar paint, and toxic hematite dust was sprinkled everywhere. C. The Baha 1000. a Mexican off-road race, is among the most prestigious off-road races in the world. It covers roughly 1,000 miles of dangerous desert. It is plagued by spectators who set dangerous traps for the drivers, including hidden holes, jump ramps, and hidden caches of rocks. The bamboo pit viper was weaponized by the Viet Cong in the Vietnam War. Snake traps were known as 3-step traps because you only had time to take 3 steps before the venom killed you. In the tunnel complexes, they stuffed the irritated snake into the hollow bamboo framework, meaning that any US tunnel rats were in for a nasty surprise. I'm voting for B. Cinnabar and hematite were used as pigments as late as the 19th century, as far as I can remember. Appalachian and NorCal landmine fields around marijuana grows are definitely a real thing. There are waterproof duffels of cash buried or stashed nearby if that counts. NorCal landmine fields around marijuana grows. It's an old memory, but I used to hear about law enforcement searching for marijuana fields by finding dead deer and other animals. Tripwires connected to guns send a very particular message, apparently. On archaeological surveys on federal land, in Humboldt County, CA, we had to be on the lookout for illegal pot grows and their booby traps. I've heard horror stories about someone's eyes being sliced open from hidden fish wire lines in the vegetation. Yes, my time to shine. Former archaeologist over here. While not a booby trap, I was working on a Civil War era cemetery dig, and apparently a popular embalming chemical at that time contained arsenic. So if we ever smelled garlic, we had to immediately put on hazmat suits and latex gloves. Dig season is also usually during the summers, when it's easier to get volunteers. Which means we were always drenched in sweat at the end of the day, because those things do not breathe at all. Because those things do not breathe at all. Yes, but because they don't breathe, you continue to do so. I remember hearing that most Egyptian tombs were actually robbed by the family members of the deceased, or the priests responsible for preparing the body in the tomb. They knew which tombs had the best loot. It was frowned upon for religious reasons, and officially it was highly illegal, but apparently everybody did it and it was a common custom. The authorities often looked the other way when family members robbed a tomb. I heard somewhere about some tombs having massive lakes of algae-infested waters. Something about the waters left them incredibly acidic or something. Basically falling and it would cause seriously gruesome injuries. There's this story of 2 older brothers, we'll call them J and K, cause I can't remember their names, who lived in an apartment together. J was disabled, and fully dependent on K for having basic needs met. Because of the sheer amount of stuff they had everywhere, the place was basically booby-trapped. They may have placed some traps intentionally, but I don't remember exactly. They were also very reclusive, and seldom left or allowed anyone in. Someone in their building called for a wellness check for one reason or another, and they found the decomposing bodies of both brothers in their apartment. K had been killed by one of the booby traps, and as a result, J died several days later. A part of ancient Egypt had made a huge pit of snakes to protect a tomb before, and the snakes bred to where there were king cobras everywhere. It nearly killed 2, but medicine and some survival instincts saved them. At least if this book I read it correct, but I am not sure. As an archaeologist, I can tell you every site is a booby trap when you account for how drunk students get on a field school. On a more serious note, the biggest dangers to our health are injuries from improper footing, falling material, bad control of tools, sometimes vehicles. More tangibly, it's disease from biting insects. Some locations wildlife is a factor. The only potentially dangerous stuff to dig up that I've either encountered myself or known people who have is disease from preserved biological remains and unexploded ordnance from past conflicts. I mean, on the one site I worked on, I was the only one with any familiarity with firearms and explosives, so everyone freaked out over nothing every time they found something, and I just went ahead and disposed of it. For where that site was and how heavily the area was bombed, I'm sure the only reason there wasn't anything major left was because the farmers had cleared it out in the plowing. A related question: if I were to activate said booby traps, then the next tomb raider wouldn't have to deal with them. Or is there some kind of ancient technology recharging the poison dart machine? I don't know about archaeological sites, but definitely in modern day M labs, lots of booby traps. They don't want people in their M. So here in Russia we have some enthusiasts who are called black diggers. People going by this name can be just some hobbyists, or archaeologists without a permit to work on site, or some guys looking for stuff left in the wilderness to sell on black market. And when I mean wilderness I mean old camps and bunkers left in World War II by Nazis when they retreated. While some could still find some old grenades or even more serious crap like MP40, some could also find minefields. And sometimes it can be too late to acknowledge this, if you catch my drift. I can totally suspend my disbelief to accept that ancient peoples rigged tombs and crap with booby traps to keep out looters. What I can't accept is that these rudimentary machines still function perfectly after hundreds of years of no maintenance. Take a brand new Corolla, stick it in a cave and abandon it for 500 years. See if it still works. No, but a 1994 Corolla would. The first emperor of China is buried in a mound-style pyramid full of booby traps and mercury rivers. The gov doesn't want to go in and get wrecked, so they forbid anyone from trying to enter. It may not be of any historical value, but during the Vietnam War, there was actually a hole placed in the ground on my family's property, supposedly connected to other tunnels and holes. My cousins tried to trick me into going into it until my uncle came across us and they got in major trouble. Apparently, the hole was booby trapped and no one knew how to turn them off anymore. I asked for more detail from my cousins later on and they theorized everything from pockets of napalm to explosives. I have no idea if they were still just freaking with me, but probably. This is a really good question. Usually the danger while doing archaeology comes from digging accidents, like cave-ins and falls, and environment like getting hurt while camping around a secluded site or heat stroke. A lot of these movies don't really show digging practices. These days you're trained to section off a site in an organized manner, level your unit, and document everything as you dig down bit by bit. If you don't do this, you kind of ruin the whole point of digging. For example, the artifact Indiana Jones looted from that indigenous group, the item itself is just as important as where and how it was placed. So is having a good relationship with locals. If you aren't a part of the community yourself, your research should be in service to their community and informed by them and their needs. Archaeologists treat sites more like crime scenes and because of that it's not likely a booby trap will just spring out at you. Plus a lot of deterrents may not look or act like a romanticized Hollywood idea of a booby trap. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.